old box or an imitation, which may find somewhere but not be authorized by the post office, will not do the work. Similarly, God has an authorized representation in the deity form, which is called Archa Vigraha. The Archa Vigraha is an incarnation of the Supreme Lord. God will accept service through that form. The Lord is omnipotent, all powerful. Therefore, by his incarnation as Archa Vigraha, he can accept the service of the devotee just to make it convenient for the man in conditioned life. So, for a devotee, there is no difficulty in approaching the Supreme immediately and directly. But for those who are following the impersonal way to spiritual realization, the path is difficult. They have to understand the unmanifested representation of the Supreme through Vedic literatures as the Upanishads. And they have to learn the language, understand the non-perceptual feelings, non-perceptual feelings, and realize all these processes. This is not very easy for a common man. A person in Krishna consciousness engaged in devotional service simply by the guidance of the bona fide spiritual master, simply by offering regular obeisances to deities, simply by hearing the glories of the Lord, and simply by eating the remnants of foodstuffs offered to the Lord, realizes the Supreme Personality of Godhead very easily. There is no doubt that the impersonalists are unnecessarily taking a troublesome path with the risk of not realizing the absolute truth at the ultimate end. But the personalist, without any risk, trouble, or difficulty, approaches the Supreme Personality of directly. A similar passage appears in Srimad Bhagavatam. It is stated that if one ultimately has to surrender unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, this surrendering process is called bhakti, but instead takes the trouble to understand what is Brahman and what is not Brahman, and spends his whole life in that way, the result is simply troublesome. Therefore, it is advised here that one should not take up the troublesome path of self-realization because there is uncertainty in the ultimate result. A living entity is eternally an individual soul, and if he wants to merge into the supreme spiritual whole, he may accomplish the realization of the eternal and the knowledgeable aspects of his original nature, but the blissful portion is not realized. By the grace of some devotee, such a transcendentalist, highly learned in the process of Jnana Yoga, may come to the point of Bhakti Yoga or devotional service. At that time, long practice in impersonalism also becomes a source of trouble because he cannot give up the idea. Therefore, an embodied soul is always in difficulty with the unmanifest, both at the time of practice and at the time of realization. Every living soul is particularly independent. One should know for certain that this unmanifested realization is against the nature of the spiritual blissful self. One should not take up this process. For every individual living entity, the process of Krishna consciousness, which entails full engagement in devotional service, is the best way. If one wants to ignore this devotional service, there is danger of turning to atheism. Thus, the process of centering attention on the unmanifested, the inconceivable, which is beyond the approach of the senses, as already expressed in this verse, should never be encouraged at any time, especially in this age. It is not advised by Lord Krishna. Long purports. So just chant the invocations. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshuru Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Guru Vaishnavamta Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatam Vitam tam sajivam sadvaitam savadutam parijana saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sagana Lalita Shri Vishakan Vitam Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Dr. Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kupa Sindhu Vivata Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. So I'll just read the verse again. For those whose minds are attached to the unmanifested, impersonal feature of the Supreme, advancement is very troublesome. To make progress in that discipline is always difficult for those who are embodied. So again, this is coming from the 12th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. So we know the structure of the Bhagavad Gita. It is broken up into 3 sections. So in the first 6 chapters, Krishna speaks about karma yoga and the different yoga features. And then in the final 6 chapters, in 13 through 18, Krishna is speaking about knowledge of the different aspects of the material nature and how everything is manifested. But in the middle section, this chapter 7 through 12, Krishna is speaking exclusively about devotional service, about bhakti. And now we are approaching the end of Krishna's direct presentation on devotional service. And so it's a very important chapter. And this chapter, like many chapters, opens with a question from Arjuna. And Arjuna is giving us, a great instruction here that this dialogue of the Bhagavad Gita, it is not a one-way dialogue, but it is actually a series of questions and answers. And this is our Vedic process. We are meant to inquire, right? Krishna told us already in the 4th chapter, in the title of the chapter, Transcendental Knowledge, he said that one should approach a bona fide spiritual master, and one should pariprashnena sevaya. One should inquire and render service to the guru. So this inquiry is very, very important because inquiry is the means by which we can exhaust all of our doubts. When we have doubts in the process or doubt in some feature of devotional service, it prevents us from fully surrendering. That we become hesitant. Is it this? Is it that? How do I know? Right. So in this way, inquiry is very, very important. So Arjuna opens this question with a very specific question, which he says that which are considered to be more perfect, those who are always properly engaged in your devotional service, or those who worship the impersonal Brahman, the unmanifested. So Arjuna is asking very clearly now, what is better, bhakti in devotional service or the impersonal meditation? And, our acharyas talk about why Arjuna is asking this now, right? Because already Krishna at the end of the 6th chapter has said bhakti is the highest of all. Yoginam api sarvesham madgate nantaratma shaddavan vachate yomam same yuktata. He said of all the yogis, the bhakta yogi, who is embodied with faith, is the highest of all. So he's already said that. In the 8th chapter, Krishna has spoke about devotional service and how remembering him at the time of death is what takes one back home, back to Godhead, is antakalecha mamela smala mukla kalevaram. So he has given that. In the 9th chapter, Krishna has spoken, what to do. Manmano bhakto madhimam namaskaro. So he's giving, repeatedly devotional service as the means. So, but Arjuna is asking this question now. In context, we should remember that what has just preceded this chapter is the chapter of the Vishwarup, the universal form. And here, Arjuna saw the universal form, at first was astonished and was wondering, but then at time became fearful and asked Krishna, now return to your original form. I don't want to see this. Okay? And so Arjuna also doesn't want us to be, confused, thinking, oh, this universal form is some giant form. Maybe that is supreme. Maybe that is superior. And some like to, think that way. Oh, that is the giant form, so that must be, and everything must emanate from there. But we know that the universal form, it is a subordinate feature of Krishna. It is a temporary manifestation. It is there simply for the whole of the material universe to rest upon. And when the material universe is its duration is concluded, and it merges back into the body of Karandaksha Vishnu, the universal form also withdraws itself. So it is a temporary manifestation, where Krishna, in his original two-arm form, is eternally present. And that is why, we say, we celebrate Krishna's appearance day. We might casually say birth, but he is not born. He simply appears and then disappears, but he is always present. But the universal form is not. So Arjuna here wants to draw a very clear distinction between this two-arm form, the original form of Krishna, and any other form, including ultimately the impersonal. And here, Arjuna wants to make it explicit. Krishna has already glorified bhakti, but he has not yet compared it to the impersonal path. And so to make no doubt about what is the best and most recommended path for us, Arjuna asked this question, and Krishna then answers it very sweetly. So to reinforce our faith in the process of bhakti, and that it being the superior process to jnana yoga, Krishna then answers Arjuna's questions. And he says in the second verse of this chapter that those who are always worshiping me with great faith are considered by me to be most perfect. So is there any ambiguity? Can there be any doubt? Right? Krishna says this is the most perfect path, is devotional service. Those who worship him with great faith. So this is, again, Krishna has said it different ways, but now in a direct answer to Arjuna's question, he has answered that statement. So now the question might become, well, why? Right? Why is bhakti the best, the highest, the most perfect, according to Krishna? And so now that really is what we get answered here in the fifth verse. And as Krishna does, he gives complete information. He gives us the answer, but then also the support, the reasons behind, so that we can have firm faith in it, not just take it sentimentally, but to take it with great faith so that we can work conclusively in the process of devotional service. Because remember, in the end of this Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is going to tell, Sarva dharmam parityaja mamekam sharanam ja. We should abandon all varieties of religion, and mam ekam, just surrender unto Krishna. That's it. Okay? So that's going to be the conclusive instruction. But here now, Krishna is going to explain to us why the impersonal process is very difficult and why the process of bhakti is most perfect. Now, Srila Prabhupada gives us a very detailed and elaborate purport. And so from that, we can glean the importance of this verse. Srila Prabhupada doesn't write just to fill pages. He's very selective and very discerning in what to comment on. So the length of his commentary here also gives us some indication of the importance of this verse. Sometimes when we get to a verse with a long purport, I want to just pass through this. But we should remember that when Srila Prabhupada writes a longer purport, we should read it twice, thrice, because it means it's some very important things and topics that Srila Prabhupada must convey to us in order for us to really understand it. So we have a long purport. So let's break it down into a few different segments and understand what Krishna is saying, again, in answering the principal question now, why bhakti is superior to the impersonal path. He's already said it in the second verse, and now he's explaining why. So he says that advancement is very troublesome. This is the impersonal process, right? So he says the impersonal process is very troublesome, particularly for somebody who is embodied, right? So once we have a body, when we have this body, right? And we know it has so many different needs and features and functions. Well, the impersonal process is one of intense meditation and concentration. But the body, it makes it so hard to meditate on this spirit, on this impersonal feature, right? My leg hurts, then I get hungry, I need to use the washroom, then I'm thirsty, then I have an itch on this side of my head, and then my elbow's itching, and then I have some tickling feeling here. Like the body is constantly giving all these sensations, and all of that distracts the mind, right? So the body, us having a body makes this meditation process hard. But Prabhupada writes even further that to focus on something that is formless, that has no form, like meditating on light, we can understand formless in some way of imagine, meditating on the sunlight, right? It is a ray of light. Well, we have a form, we have a body, we have a form. And so because we have a form, it's very difficult for us to, understand this formless feature. It's difficult to fix our mind. When we think about, Krishna, and we think about his beautiful, bluish skin, his locks of black curly hair, his shark-shaped earrings, we're reciting Damodar Astakam every day during this month, and Satyavata Muni's meditation is, don't ever let me forget this beautiful, face of yours as Bala Gopal, right? So the beautiful features of the Lord are easier to meditate on, because we can appreciate that beauty. So us having a form, it makes that very, very, very nice. The second aspect that makes the impersonal process so difficult, Srila Prabhupada comments on, is, because the soul by nature is active, it is difficult for us to be inactive. The senses need some engagement. If you try to restrict the senses, eventually they will snap back. It's like a spring. If you have a spring, you can compress that spring, but eventually the nature of that spring is to be uncompressed. So eventually that spring is going to pop. Whatever we're holding it eventually will break. So similarly, the senses, we may try to temporarily withdraw them, temporarily restrict them, but it becomes very difficult. And we saw this in chapter 6 of Bhagavad Gita, when Krishna was explaining this dhyana yoga, this Ashtanga yoga process. And Arjuna said, it's impossible. To control the mind so steadily is very difficult, because by nature we are active, and to sit in idle meditation is not very easy. So this impersonal path, which requires great focused meditation, because the soul is active by nature, is very difficult to maintain the duration of time required to be successful. Whereas we see in devotional service, what do we get to do? We get to engage our senses, not stop them. We get to see the beautiful forms of the Lord. We get to hear the beautiful pastimes and beautiful bhajans of the Lord and sing kirtan. We get to taste and honor the sumptuous prasadam of all kinds of varieties. Right? We get to smell the incense and the flowers offered to the Lord. And so in devotional service, we get to engage all our senses in a higher purpose. But in the impersonal path, we actually have to stop all the senses. And that is what makes this process very, very difficult. And thus, the impersonalists find it very, very difficult. And even the culmination of success, if one reaches this impersonal liberation, what is it? Well, this impersonal liberation, one does not still get to engage their senses with Krishna. So Prabhupada explains, it's not a permanent state, because one needing some activity will ultimately fall down from that sphere. You can imagine, you see a beautiful lake, and it's crystal clear waters. The sky is blue. Air is very comfortable, and you enter onto a raft, and you're just floating on this lake, and you're enjoying. This is life. Forget everything and just float. How long can you do that? 1 hour, 2 hours. Eventually, you'll want to do something. You'll want some activity. Just lying and floating does not give the satisfaction that the soul craves. It is not our nature. So similarly, this, merging into the Brahman effulgence, it is like floating in this effulgence. But remember, we maintain our individuality. We do not merge into the effulgence. Just as Krishna said in this 12th verse of the 2nd chapter, never was there a time that I did not exist, nor you. Neither shall either of us cease to be. So even in the impersonal liberation, we become individual, the soul, but it is floating in the Brahmajyoti. It doesn't merge within it, it floats. And so it has sensation, just like floating on a raft. We don't become one with the lake, but we are floating in the lake. But there is a need for activity. And so ultimately one will come down. So this impersonal path finds that one becomes unsatisfied. It doesn't fulfill. It may satisfy for a small amount of time, but eventually, because the soul is nature, the soul is active by nature, and its highest fulfillment is devotional service, it will fall. But because the impersonalist does not understand the personal form of the Lord, it cannot engage its senses in devotional service. So what it does is engages its senses back in matter. And so it falls back down. And Prabhupada always writes about, the different Mayavadi sannyasis. They engage in so many humanitarian works and so many humanitarian things because their senses are not satisfied in their, in the speculative work that they do. Right? So this is the nature of this. And again, in devotional service, we see one gets to engage their senses 100% in chanting and reading and singing and honoring prasadam and so many things, right? So this is the opportunity, and thus the process of devotional service is far superior, because in theory, the impersonal process, if one progresses and perfects it, it will bring one to bhakti. So the conclusion of the impersonal path is the beginning of devotional service. It is not that the impersonal path takes one to a separate destination. So remember the yoga ladder, it is a ladder, meaning one step leads to the next step, and that step leads to the next step. On a ladder, each step doesn't take you to a different destination. It takes you sequentially higher to low. So the conclusion of jnana yoga, this impersonal process, is to bring one to bhakti. But the problem is twofold. One, the impersonal path, it can take many lifetimes to make progress. And along the way, one may be swept away by some other process. One may get allured by some other activity and thus fall away from their process. And so it takes a very long time to do it. Two, the process itself is not sweet. It is very dry. One is, again, doing intense meditation, speculating on Shastra. It is a very dry process. So it's difficult. It's a long time and it's difficult. And the third and most important is that in the impersonal process, one does not get the assistance and the mercy of Krishna. So Krishna will tell us in a couple of verses, in the very next verse, he says, to my devotee, I am the swift deliverer from the ocean of birth and death. So Krishna says, I am the deliverer, swiftly, very quickly. But for the impersonalists, they're on their own. So one does not obtain the mercy of Krishna in making progress. So this is why, three reasons that this impersonal class is very difficult. It's very timely, it's very dry, it doesn't satisfy the senses, and one does not get the mercy of Krishna on our own. So for these reasons, Krishna has established, without a doubt, the superiority of the bhakti path. Anyways, the impersonal path is going to end in devotional service, so why not begin there? And of course, One might wonder, well, doesn't one have to graduate from the impersonal path to then the bhakti path? Like you have to go from first grade to second grade to third grade like this? Maybe one might think, right? So, but Krishna has already told us in the 9th chapter, Bhaktaram Pushpam Palam Toyam, Yome Bhakti Prayachati. To do bhakti, the highest process, one simply needs to offer a fruit, a water, a flower, or a leaf. So there's no hard and fast rules. Krishna even says, even a dog eater, the most unqualified, can do directly to devotional service. So we have the opportunity to go directly to devotional service, which is as opposed to an impersonal path, very sweet because one gets to enjoy their senses. It's very quick because one is getting the power of devotional service. And 3, Krishna personally comes and assists us in a way. So this makes devotional service the far superior. And so if we look in our Shastra, we see many examples of this. Right? So we see the power of bhakti over all other processes. We have the example of Ambarish Maharaj and Durvasa Muni. Ambarish Maharaj was a pure devotee of the Lord. He was fully engaged all of his senses in devotional service. And we know that at one point he was performing a special vrata of following Ekadashi for 1 year. And actually that Ekadashi falls in the month of Kartik. So it's very appropriate that we discussed it a little bit today. But Ambarish Maharaj is performing this pastime, performing this vrat of Ekadashi for 1 year. And 1 year he fasted for the benefit of all the citizens of the world, not for his own gain, but to facilitate all of the citizens' progress towards devotional service. So he's performing this fast, and the time for breaking the fast was coming on the Dwadashi day. After following Ekadashi, there's a specific prescribed time in which we must break our fast to complete the Ekadashi vrat. So this time was coming, and Durvasa Muni had come with all of his followers. And so Ambarish Maharaj said, please come and take prasad. And he was feeding all the great personalities prasad. So he said, please come. So Durvasa Muni, said, well, I must take bath first. And so he went and took bath along with all of his followers. And the time was taking long. And now the time to break the fast was coming to an end. So Ambarish Maharaj was concerned what to do. Because if I don't break my fast appropriately, then the whole vrat will be ruined. And all the citizens will not get the benefit. But on the other hand, if I break my fast, it is inappropriate for me to eat before my guest. And Durvasa Muni is my guest. So Ambarish Maharaj, like the intelligent person he is, consults the great Brahmanas and says, okay, what to do? He does not make unilateral decisions, but he consults. And the Brahmanas say, okay, you take some achman. Taking some achman, on one hand, is considered breaking your fast, but on the other hand, it is not considered a transgression of etiquette of eating before your guests. So in this way, you'll break your fast, but also honor your requirement of etiquette of having Durvasa Muni first be fed. So he, of course, did this, and Durvasa Muni, being the great mystic yogi that he was, understood what Ambarish Maharaj did. So he became very angry. And I'm just going to, shorten this story just for the point. But Durvasa Muni comes back in front of Ambarish Maharaj and becomes fiery mad. He is very, very angry, thinking that Ambarish Maharaj has insulted him, disrespected him by, eating before him. So he, takes a hair from his head and throws it on the ground, invokes this fiery demon. And this demon starts to attack Ambarish Maharaj. But what is Ambarish Maharaj's disposition? He's very calm. He's very humble. He is not arguing back with Durvasa Muni. He is not saying, how can you do this? This is, no. He takes he says, okay, this is Krishna's plan. Then this is Krishna's plan. Very calm. And of course, Krishna always protects his devotee. And so immediately Sudarshan Chakra comes and destroys that demon. Ambrish Maharaj was the least bit phased. He was not running. He was not fearful. He was fully confident. This is the power of bhakti. Even in the midst of such difficulties, the devotee is comforted by the statements Krishna makes repeatedly in Bhagavad Gita, that he is our protector. He is our ever well-wisher. He provides what we need and preserves what we have. So that in this way, Ambrish Maharaj was very calm. And of course, Sudarshan Chakra came, destroyed the demon, and then went on a chase and chased Durvasa Muni all over. Durvasa Muni could not find relief from that chakra, and he went to Lord Brahma, Lord Shiva, ultimately Lord Vishnu, and Lord Vishnu said, I cannot help you. You have to go and beg forgiveness from Ambrish Maharaj. So Ambrish Maharaj was just waiting there. Another full year elapsed. The second year, Nirjala, we do Nirjala one day, we are like really difficult. This is second year. And is there, and he is waiting for Durvasa Muni to return. And Durvasa Muni returns and falls at the feet of Ambrish Maharaj and begs for forgiveness. And of course, Ambrish Maharaj took no offense, being a devotee, and thus, there's past amends. But we see in this what the response was of Ambrish Maharaj, what the qualities and character was, and what the response was from Durvasa Muni. From the slightest of provocation, taking Achman, he wanted to kill Ambrish Maharaj. And so this is we see the purity of bhakti and how high devotional service is. And the other pastime I just wanted to share in brief is the important instruction Chaitanya Mahaprabhu gives. See, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu tells us very, very explicitly and very strongly, we must avoid this impersonalist philosophy. It is very, very dangerous. This, Mayavadi Bhashya, if we hear it, it will ruin and destroy everything. Sarvanasha, he says, everything will be destroyed. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, when he came to Puri, after taking sannyas, after wrapping up his Navadvip Leela, the first 20 years of his appearance, he then took sannyas, as we know, and Mother Sachi at Advaita Acharya's house begged that don't go to Vrindavan, but go to Jagannath Puri. Since Jagannath Puri was closer, Mother Sachi felt more comforted by that. And so Chaitanya Mahaprabhu goes to Jagannath Puri. And there we have the very sweet pastime of the Lord Nityananda breaking Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's danda into three parts. And there are many sweet reasons for that. But one of the reasons is he wanted Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to have darshan of Lord Jagannath first by himself, not with the traveling party. So in that breaking of that, in that sort of pretending to be upset, he runs ahead of Lord Nityananda and all the associates and runs to the Jagannath temple. And there he sees Lord Jagannath in this mood of devotion. And he is jumping and dancing in ecstasy and so transcendental symptoms. And he faints. And there Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya is there. Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, is a great learned scholar of the impersonalist philosophy. He is an impersonalist. And so he sees this and he's very bewildered by what kind of personality is this? Some transcendental symptoms that he could not understand. And so he had Chaitanya Mahaprabhu brought to his house. And there he took great care of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and slowly, awoken him. The rest of the associates came, and the pastime sort of continues. But in that conversation, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, suggest to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu that, you have taken initiation here, but you could have taken from a higher lineage and like this. And so Chaitanya Mahaprabhu takes a very humble position and says, I am not qualified. I am not so learned. And then Sarvabhaumacharya then begins to, preach to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And he's preaching this impersonalist philosophy. And he is preaching and he is explaining and speaking for 7 days. He goes on speaking. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has not said one word. And finally, at the end of the 7th day, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya says, you're just sitting here quietly. Don't you have any questions? And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, well, you told me to listen. You didn't tell me to ask questions. So then Sarvabhauma, well, do you have any questions? He says, well, I am finding it, easy to understand Vedanta, but I'm not understanding anything you are saying. You are completely confusing the real purport of Vedanta. And Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya was taken aback, was shocked, what? And so Chaitanya Mahaprabhu asks him to speak, to give some explanation on this Atma Rama verse that comes in Srimad Bhagavatam in the 1st canto. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu hears Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya's explanation. He explains, I think, some 9 different ways and whatnot. And then Chaitanya Mahaprabhu responds. And there Chaitanya Mahaprabhu gives, from the personalist standpoint, from the point of bhakti, the explanation in 18 different ways. And Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya is completely overwhelmed. And he is shocked. Wow, this is knowledge. This is the real learned personality. And Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya immediately surrenders to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And he feels fulfilled in his heart. Why? Because years and years and years he has been studying this Vedanta on an impersonal basis. And it was not satisfying. It was not satiating him. But as soon as he heard this, the personalist understanding, he became overwhelmed in ecstasy, in satisfaction, as if he had finally tasted Vedanta. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu bestows upon him the very great benediction and shows him this 6-armed form, very unique Sadbhuj form of Krishna, where Krishna is presenting himself, 2 arms with a bow and arrow, and Lord Ramchandra, 2 arms with a flute, in the Krishna Leela, and of course in the sannyas form with a water pot and staff. And Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya understands this is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And he writes very beautiful verses, 100 verses, glorifying Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And when they showed him to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he became very shy and he ripped them up. But thankfully, the devotee, I think it's Gopinathacharya, had written them on the entryway of that door in the house, so that 2 of them were preserved. But in glorifying Chaitanya Mahaprabhu as the Supreme Lord. So Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, in a few short days, elevated himself after such long, intensive study, became, a pure devotee of the Lord through the association of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu by coming to the platform of bhakti. So this impersonalist, they must elevate, they must come to the platform of devotional service to be satisfied. And this is, we see this throughout our Shastra. We know Chaitanya Mahaprabhu delivering the sages or the sannyasis at Varanasi, like this same type of thing. So over and over again, we see this. So here again, just coming back to this verse to summarize, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Krishna has explained that the most perfect path is devotional service. And that this impersonalist path is very troublesome for the living entity. It's troublesome because it's a very long process. It's a very dry process, and one does not get the mercy of Krishna. As compared to in devotional service, one can make very quick progress, as he says, Krishna says in the next verse, I am the swift deliver her. It was very fast. It's very sweet. We get to enjoy so many different activities in devotional service. And finally, we get the direct assistance of Krishna himself. And so this devotional service, it is the highest process, and it is also the most accessible process that Krishna says, this is the best of all. And so now, from here, Krishna is going to glorify for the remainder of this chapter the beautiful aspects of devotional service, particularly the last 6 or 7 verses are very, very sweet, where Krishna describes the qualities of the devotees and how they are very dear to him when the devotee possesses these qualities. And they're very, very sweet. And they speak to us about how powerful devotional service is that they can take us from the lowest rung with the most impure qualities and bestow upon us the greatest of all qualities. So this is a little bit on verse 12.5. Thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki.
Thank you, Prabhuji, so much. It was a wonderful class, and a lot of things to learn. Yeah, because our mind gets diverted very often, as you mentioned.
Yes.
So, devotees, if you have any questions, please open up. You will get some interesting answers from Prabhuji. If you are struggling with something, with work or with your devotion, or mind is getting diverted, please, it's getting late. If you can ask some quick questions if you have, that would be nice. Go ahead, Prabhu, or Mataji, if anybody's like to ask anything.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Dhanavad, Prabhu. Yeah, I'm ready here. Prabhu, one question related to this impersonalism. Sorry, Prabhu, if I ask something wrong, I beg your pardon.
No problem.
Prabhu, I don't know whether it's, I heard the Shankaracharya, who is the topmost seer of this Mayavada philosophies. And yeah, interestingly, like I heard like the Jagannatha also written by Shankaracharya, Prabhu, the Kadachit Kalindi, that one. So my question, Prabhu, the Shankaracharya that say like is the incarnation of Lord Shiva. And in our ISKCON, we say like Vaishnavanam Yada Shambhu. So he is, Shiva is the greatest Vaishnava. So how come the greatest Vaishnava is coming and teaching the Mayavada philosophy, Prabhu? That is my question, Prabhu. Sorry, Prabhu, if I asked something wrong.
No, nothing at all. So actually, Shankaracharya is not teaching Mayavadi philosophy. He was teaching the impersonal feature of the Lord, because he came after Lord Buddha had appeared. And there was a progressive return to devotional service. So when Lord Buddha came, because there was such prolific misuse of the Vedas, and people were using the Vedas as an excuse, a license to perform extreme amounts of animal slaughter, using different Vedic rites and saying, see, in this Veda, we can do this and that. And so Lord Buddha came and just said, I have to stop this. So he spoke against the Vedas, though he's an incarnation, and just to simply get everybody to stop the mass animal slaughter, using the Vedas as the license to do so, which was obviously misconstrued. So Lord Buddha comes and stops it. Now, to reestablish back to the original purpose, it takes a couple of steps. Because if someone comes and, no, now you worship Krishna, well, that's, went from nothing, nirvana and voidism to Krishna, that's too far. So Lord Shiva appears as Shankaracharya, and he comes to say, okay, you just understand the supreme to be light, spirit, this impersonal feature. So he was getting people to come to at least the impersonal state. And we know the Brahman stage of realization is the first stage in realizing Krishna. We have first realized a Brahman, then Paramatma, then Bhagavan. Right? So there are 3 progressive steps in realization. So this is the first step in realizing, because where is Brahman coming from? It's coming from Krishna. It's coming from the body of Krishna. Right? So this is what Shankaracharya, and we know at the end his final teaching was Bhaja Govindam, Bhaja Govindam.
Right.
And Govinda. Who's Govinda? Govinda is a person. So he was not a Mayavadi, because understand, let's make sure we have a very clear understanding. What's the difference between an impersonalist and a Mayavadi? There's slight distinction. So one can choose to associate or be attracted to the impersonal feature of the Lord, but not deny the personal feature of the Lord. So I like the impersonal feature, but I understand there's a personal feature. That position is not as dangerous as the Mayavadi. The Mayavadi philosophy says there is no personal feature of the Lord. It is only impersonal. Krishna, when he comes to the material world, he is forced by Maya to assume a form. And when he goes back to the spiritual world, he becomes impersonal again. So the Mayavadi is denying the existence of Krishna. And the purpose for that is to fulfill the Mayavadi's desire to be one with God. So if God is a person, they cannot become that person. But if they say, no, it's impersonal in feature, we all can merge back into that. And they use the example of the river flowing into the ocean. When the river returns to the ocean, it all merges. But as our Acharyas and Srila Prabhupada comments, yes, that is true, but we are not in the river, we are the aquatics within the river. So when the fish swims from the river into the ocean, it's still a fish. Right? So Shankaracharya was not a Mayavadi in denying the existence of God, of the personal feature, but he was preaching impersonalism to bring people to that level. And then ultimately they'd come to Paramatma realization and Bhagavan realization. But in his own teachings, he wrote, Bhaja Govindam, Bhaja Govindam. Right? That was his conclusive instruction. So what happened is the subsequent followers of Shankaracharya have misconstrued, twisted the original teachings, and thus it has become this atheistic philosophy denying the form of Krishna. Because again, Lord Shiva, he is the authority of one of our Vaishnava sampradayas. Right? We have 4 bona fide sampradayas, one coming from Lord Brahma, one coming from Lakshmi Devi, one coming from Sanat Kumar, and the 4th is coming from Lord Shiva himself. And as you said, Prabhuji, he is Vaishnavam Yatha Shambhu. Right? He is the highest Vaishnava. So Shankaracharya himself came for a specific purpose, preach, but the followers have since twisted the philosophy to make it into an atheistic philosophy. Hope that helps.
Oh, thank you, Prabhu. Actually, I had the question on Buddha also. You covered that too. Oh, thank you very much, Prabhu. Hare Krishna. Thank you, Prabhu.
Prabhuji, wonderful question and a wonderful explanation. Thank you. We got a lot of benefit. So, Prabhuji, this I would like to, when others are getting ready, maybe with some question. Hopefully, you are not getting late.
No, I have time.
That Mayavadi Bhasya Sunile Hoy Sarvanas, that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's thing you are quoting, very often we unfortunately, that explanation is correct. I am also aware of that, but often we take it or immediately it comes to Shankaracharya and his followers. So it was not directly against Shankaracharya, is that correct? It was the followers who have misconstrued and represented wrongly. Was it that or?
Yeah, because again, Mayavadi means that they deny the existence of Krishna as a person.
Right. So it's not a okay.
Yeah, you can be an impersonalist and just be attracted to the impersonal feature while acknowledging that there is a personal feature. Right? That is not an offensive position.
Denying that.
The offensive position is if I say you do not exist, that's offensive. Right? That's offensive. Right? To say Krishna does not exist as a supreme person is offensive. Right? So that's why we have to be careful. If somebody is attracted to the impersonal feature, they may be innocently thinking, okay, this is something I am attracted, not knowing more, they can continue. So that what Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is strongly preaching against is the Mayavadi who is denying the form.
So, Prabhuji, that Namo Narayan, whatever they call it, they are all Mayavadis. You are Narayan, I am Narayan. After death, once we leave this body, we are all God or Mars too. So that's
Yeah, and that's why they deny the form, because it fulfills their desire to be God. That's why we're here in the material world in the first place.
Right, we want. So, Prabhuji, another one or two small questions that. So why this Ambarish Maharaj and Durvasa Muni episode or pastime was played? I am thinking purely. Obviously, Krishna has a plan. He will achieve multiple goals in one thing. The one thing comes to mind is to just glorify his devotees. Is there any other reason or any angle we can take it? No.
I think we can glorify the power of bhakti.
Okay.
How bhakti brings about qualities that cannot be brought about in any other process. We can compare and contrast another scenario, and this is not to minimize one, but to glorify bhakti. That when Haridas Thakur was being seduced by the prostitute, he remained fixed in his chanting. And in fact, she became converted. Great devotee, right? And if we compare that to Vishwamitra Muni, when he was performing austerities in Tapasya, Lord Indra became a little bit envious, thinking if he gets too much power, so he sends Menaka to come. And not even seeing Menaka, just hearing the ankle bells, his meditation became broke and disturbed. This is a great Muni, right? And he engaged with her, and they had family. So you can see that the power of bhakti compared to this jnana process is very, very, clear in so many examples, right? So, and that's what we learn. Is that it gives us.
Prabhuji, can you hear me? I am losing you. I don't know. It's my problem or.
No, I can hear you. Yes.
Okay, I can hear you now. Okay, so then, Prabhuji, one last quick question. This devotee, this impersonalists, they obviously we struggle. I mean, impersonalist or anybody in that path, he really struggles. But again, if he is fortunate, if he comes in contact with a devotee like Gaur Kumaras, you just gave an example, so again, it is a mercy of Krishna or devotees, how or their past deeds, how they will come in contact with, because it takes many, many lifetimes. So what makes them to come in contact with, a devotee? It is accidental or it is all pre-planned?
It's not accidental. It's, Rupa Goswami explains this Agnata Sukriti, that, we do some even indirect devotional service, and that plants in our heart the desire to ultimately come to this higher platform. And so through this indirect service, it matures into direct service. Indirect service could be, for example, think, the pilot, flying Srila Prabhupada from one city to another. Yeah. He's doing devotional service, right? He is serving Prabhupada, but he has no idea. But that service is not going to go unanswered. Krishna, it will remember that. And someday that will mature into a desire to learn the truth. And Paramatma sitting in the heart will hear that desire and thus arrange for us. How we all came into Krishna consciousness, it's only by the great and extraordinary mercy of the Lord bring us in contact with the devotees so that we can go based on some past sukriti, some past actions we've done. It created that desire, maybe very small, but slowly it builds. And when we desire, then Krishna facilitates. Now, Krishna will not force it upon us, but when we desire, he makes it happen.
Thank you, Prabhuji. So, yeah, devotees, please feel free. One more question, maybe you are all silent. Go ahead if you have anything. Prabhuji's, Mataji's, anybody like to ask any question? Raj Prabhu.
Prabhuji, I missed most of the lecture. My son took the phone, and so is there a way you can summarize the whole lecture in 1 minute, Prabhuji?
It's a recording. Prabhu, I'm sorry, Prabhuji can tell, but yeah, that is a recording. You can listen, Prabhu. Yeah, go ahead, Prabhuji. I'm sorry to interrupt you. I didn't mean that, but whatever answers you can give.
I would just summarize it as bhakti is the far superior path to the impersonal path that Krishna has given a black and white explanation for why, because the impersonal path is very difficult and the path of devotional service is very sweet and pleasing. And so that is why Krishna ultimately will tell us, abandon the impersonal path and stay on the path of bhakti, devotional service, and all will be good. So that's how I would summarize it.
So this is the last call. Anybody else before we close?
Prabhu, I just have one question, if that is okay to ask, because I already asked one question.
Go ahead, Prabhu. You are in the right path. So.
No, Prabhu. Yeah, sorry, I need mercy of all the Vishnu. Prabhu, one last question, because Prabhu, even though we do anything in material jobs, we struggle a lot to progress in the bhakti, Prabhu. And as Radhayatra Prabhu was mentioning, and we read your bio, Prabhu, can you give the practical suggestions, Prabhu, to proceed in the progress? Because we always get confused. Whenever I want to do more chanting and read, I want to read at that day I get more work. Then I tend towards my work. So, Prabhu, is there any practical suggestion, Prabhu, to progress in the bhakti? Thank you, Prabhu.
Yeah, it's a great question.
Prabhuji, I would like to interject. I don't think that is, again, I'm just, that should be less only, but Prabhuji, go ahead. I'm sorry. So, what should not be more when you are really chanting? Go ahead, Prabhuji. I'm sorry.
No problem. So, yes, progress in devotional service is very, very important. And Rupa Goswami says, Utsaha Nishchaya Dharya Tat Karma Pravartana, that we must be very enthusiastic and determined. We also must be very confident and also patient to make success in devotional service. So our determination is very important. Because when we are determined in devotional service, then Krishna sees, okay, now my child is very serious, let me help him. But we must first show our determination. So progress in devotional service, first things first, chant your rounds very nicely. Your japa is the most potent form of our sadhana. So your japa, we should put, like a fence around it. When they build a castle, they dig a ditch and fill it with water, right? So that you cannot cross easily into the castle. It's called a moat. We should put a moat around our japa. Nothing gets in the way of our chanting. It doesn't matter, office work is busy, this work is busy, my body is hurting, this, that, or the other. Just sincerely and dedicatedly chant our rounds very nicely. If we do that, Krishna will see that determination. It will not go unanswered. And he will bestow so much mercy upon us to be able to manage the other things that are giving us trouble. But, now there's a but. Be prepared. Along the way, Krishna will test us. How determined are we? And he'll give some obstacle. And when we stay determined and resolute and overcome that obstacle, on the other side of that obstacle is so much mercy waiting for us to continue that much further. So we have to stay determined that I am going to do it, I'm going to do it, I am going to do it. Because, listen, if I said to us, that I have a box here full of $1 million. And so this box is yours if you chant your rounds very sincerely in Brahma Mudra for 365 days without fail. Can you do it? Yes. Because we have faith in that box. But whereas Krishna is saying, chanting around nights, it takes you to the spiritual world. What price you can put on that? But because our faith is not yet so strong, we become a little bit fluid. So by external support, we have to remain fixed in our sadhana. And again, when we do, Krishna will reciprocate, but tests will come. There will be obstacles. And I appreciate my father. My father used to always say, Krishna, give me small tests. I'm not so capable of passing your big tests. So you can even pray that way. But stay very resolute in and don't let anything get in the way of that. And when you do that, everything else will follow. Our reading, our worship, and all the other aspects. And Krishna will facilitate our schedule, our duties and responsibilities in reciprocation to that determination. But we must work, and if we do, successful.
Thank you very much, Prabhu. Wonderful. Yeah, thank you very much, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Prabhuji, I have one question. Sorry, I won't take time. You talked about determination. I feel like I have very poor determination. If it's come down to anything, even in the bhakti. So tell me, how to improve the determination.
Well, so determination. If you look at it in the material world, there's an author by the name of Stephen Covey. He's a big famous business author, written very important books on habits of highly successful people and things like this. And he writes this that we don't make time for the very important things in our life because they're not urgent. So he uses a more mundane example, we know it's important to go to the gym and exercise, but we don't get to it because we have this email to answer and this thing to do. The urgent things take up our time. Or we don't make time for important relationships in our life and to call our mother and to, be with our family or whatever, because other urgent things are there. So the important things that we know are important, we don't make happen because of this time. So, the recommendation is that, we don't let the mind decide what's going to do. We're going to let the intelligence decide. So the intelligence knows chanting is the most important thing in my day. So schedule it. It's Sunday night, at least here where I am, maybe for some of you in India, Monday morning. You schedule it. Okay, every day I'm going to chant this day, this time, every day. Schedule. Don't let the mind decide when I'm going to chant. Don't let the mind decide when I'm going to wake up. Let the intelligence decide. Intelligence knows this is good for me. This is important, right? So that's some what I call practical, sort of tips that we can use. And then to increase our determination, again, why we're determined on chanting if there's $1 million box in front of us is because
that's what I would.
it's the faith, right? So we have to increase our faith in the value and the potency of the process of devotional service. And if we appreciate the rarity of it and how fortunate we are, we'll not take it for granted and say, oh, tomorrow I'll do it. Oh, tomorrow I'll do it. So determination, Prabhupada translates in Nectar of Instruction as endeavor with intelligence. So not just endeavor, right? Because you can endeavor, but endeavor with intelligence. So using our intelligence to know what is good for me, what is best for me, and then setting our schedule and our priorities accordingly, then we can, try to be more determined and ultimately associate with others who are determined, right? Sadhu Sangha, Sarva Shastra. Everything that one wants to obtain, all the great blessings come from Lava Mata Sadhu Sangha, just a moment of association. So this is the opportunity. If we're not determined, associate with someone who is, and they'll help you be determined.
Well, thank you, Prabhuji. I'll have, I like this discussion of mind over intellect, I guess. So, and that's our intellect over mind, is always mind kind of like, wonders, and that's take us all over. Thank you again. Appreciate the answer.
So there is no guessing work here. So that is the fact. You have to work on this.
Yeah.
So thank you, devotees. Thank you, Prabhuji, for the nectarian class and full of instructions. And it was one of the wonderful class of the year so far. And we learned a lot, and it's full of lessons. Devotees, please share this YouTube recordings with some of them who could not attend. I will also share with all the devotees. And thank you, Prabhuji, for coming in short notice and enlightening us in this wonderful on this wonderful topic. And we are really grateful. And devotees, please unmute and say 3 times Hari Bol loudly for Prabhuji's, so we can get a chance soon to hear sometime next year. Hari Bol.
Hari Bol.
Hari Bol.
Hari Bol.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Thank you.